Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tea Time. I didn't use my funny voice because it's a little bit reverberant and there are people sleeping over there. So we're going to have a nice, relaxing, chill time in the morning for tea time today. So let's get right into it. We're going to talk about TheCore today. And Mr. Skull sent me a email with some interesting thoughts, and I want to read them first, and then we'll discuss solutions to problems and things like that, and maybe get to a better understanding of TheCore and why it works the way it does and why we made certain decisions, things like that. Let's just read it. Hi, I have suggestions about TheCore that I could help some players move control group usage. So in general, what have you done with the default settings of TheCore? Is pretty neat. Trying to force players or use mostly the functions of add steal, create steal. Cool. So we're going to stop there. We're going to talk. So add steal, create steal overall is better than the alternative. And that's just because there's a shortage of keys, which Mr. Skull is going to get into in just a little bit. And he has an interesting solution that we're going to talk about. But if you have to choose one or the other, I would definitely choose the steal functions because 9 times out of 10 steal is going to be better. Maybe like 99 times out of 100. Maybe we're even at like 999 times out of 1,000. The point is that the steal functions have so much more utility to them and they're so much more useful. You can do multiple action sequences that are really common faster, right? So maybe you want to go send a scout off. Click, steal to the scouting group. Bam, you know you're done. You know that there won't be any problems involved. Oh crap, something came up in the wrong control group. Steal it over to the control group it's supposed to be at instead of having to remove it from the control group it happens to be in at the time. And then, all things like this, control group management in general, there will be less actions necessary for you to do if you use the steal functions instead of using the normal function. So let's get into why that might be a problem over here. So putting the normal add and create keys to ridiculous key combinations, that's something that we call banishing. So whenever we have a key combination or a key or a function that we don't think is useful compared to what we have in place, we send it to something really far away, like Control Shift Numpad 5 and silly things like that. So that way no red unbounds come up and people don't think, okay, the layout is broken, there's something wrong with the layout, I got an unbound. Unbounds are kind of the way that we do a lot of bug fixing for TheCore. So if you have an unbound in your layout, let me know what it is, because there ideally should be no unbounds. I know right now TheCore has been having some issues with just people power, really. It just sort of, the people working on TheCore, including myself, got really busy. So it is a little bit of a mess right now, especially the small layouts have some unbounds that are a little bit tricky, but most of it seems to be in the right place. I did just re-download a version for myself for work, and I saw that some things were a little bit different, but overall, it's pretty on point. And now to the problem. But this system can raise a couple of problems for some players in specific situations. Now, the word specific should not fool you, as these situations I have found arise pretty much every 1 or 2 games on the ladder. Cool. So it's a specific scenario, but it's a frequent scenario, right? And that is, some units require to be controlled separately from one another, such as spellcasters and micro-intensive units like the Stalker. Okay. Now, as a Zerg player's problem doesn't concern me as much as other people, however, I do enjoy the occasional game of Protoss just to keep things fresh, but I digress. The problem resides in the fact that some units need to have control groups devoted to them and them alone, such as when you mentioned Stalkers should stay in separate control groups, the rest blah, blah, blah. That's in the 10 control group video. Things have changed since then. I need to make new videos. What's new? Control group sharing, or the idea that you can have a stalker that exists in one control group, your main army, so that we can move your army around. But should you need to micro your stalkers separately in a battle, you can select a control group and then control them. And while that's pretty cool, it doesn't save as much time as it does to have the steal functions. And the steal functions are mutually exclusive ideas. You can either have a control group set up with only steal functions, or you can have some kind of hybrid, or you can have this other end where you get to use shared control groups. And we're gonna get into that hybrid example. I think that's gonna be our main solution to this problem. this same concept applies to a lot of units in all races. Sure, control group sharing happens all the time. And obviously lose a few stalkers and break your wrist. This is, some silliness coming in over there. But the idea here is that it's not really meant to be losing stalkers or breaking your wrist, right? That's not what's supposed to be happening. That's just a signal to say, don't use this, please, use something else. And I think Mr. Skull, also known as Lazy Polar Bear, Lazy Bear, Laser Polar Bear, Polar Bear with lasers, something like that. In any case, he brought that up, and I think it's very good. And I think it's a he just because Mr. Skull. Otherwise, I would try to use the word they. I would still like to get most of the tools I have. So the question is, where do I put normal add function to at least a few control groups so I can easily access it, but it doesn't get in my way, or to defeat the initial purpose of the core, blah, 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 etc. Not to discount this letter. I've already read it through and it's up over there. So go look at it if you want to read the words. But the point is that their solution, which is pretty cool, is to use the mouse buttons in combination with control for control groups. And a little bit of a problem over here. So mouse 1 to 5 with control. The problem is mouse 1 and 2, right? Those are your primary clicks. Maybe just mouse 1. I think mouse 1 is already used when you control click stuff. So the problem is if you use control with the mouse buttons to use the add function, whenever you control click something, it would add a bunch of stuff to that control group and it would be a problem. Unless something's weird is happening here that I'm not used to, something new that changed in hotkeys in StarCraft. But I have the feeling that Mr. Skull did not actually get a lot of chance to test this out properly, as opposed to saying, oh, this is an idea, oh, this is what I'll do, and just hasn't noticed or hasn't run into the problem yet when trying to control click something. If control click is add to control group, that's going to be a problem. And we do a little bit more specificity, and sincerely, Lazy Bear, there it is, formerly known as Mr. Skull. First of all, thank you so much for sending this in, because it gave me something cool to talk about, something that I'm interested in, and it's a lot of fun. I always like interacting. I think I'll do this more too, by the way. If you want to send me an email where you have a question or something that you'd like me to address, it's a lot easier for me to address it in a video, because then I get to overlap my making tea time with answering your questions and interacting with you and hanging out. So it's really good for me, especially because I'm really in a crime tunch right now. I'm in a time crunch right now. And so helping me be efficient is awesome. Be efficient. You're StarCraft players. You understand efficiency. So the answer to this problem, the answer that I've found to be the best, is actually one made by the player Probe, the Australian player who's en route. Uses the core. He actually uses like 0. When we were still in beta, before we officially announced, but like 0.3.3 or something. Actually, I think he's on 0.1. He's on like one of the very first versions of the core before it was as good as it is now, which is interesting. And he's been customizing and updating, which is the way that I suggest that everyone does the core. You download the core once, and from then on, you slowly turn that into your own magical creation of exactly what you want it to be. And as new things arise, like new co-op commanders and things like that, just add on some new keys. It's not too difficult. If you're having trouble, definitely post on the Team Liquid thread and there'll be someone to help you out. Be like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what I should do for co-op. What kind of keys, what keys do I use? This is my layout. What keys do you think I should use for, the top bar abilities? Because we currently don't have those bound in the core, for example. But just kind of get into it yourself and explore, use the core as this template, and then personalize it to your own intuitions. If you find yourself wanting to press a certain key to build a supply depot, and you keep doing it, just change that key to be supply depot as you're learning the core, and then it becomes your own sort of intuitive, beautiful mess, which is, I think, a lot of fun. In any case, Probe has a really cool solution to this. Probe has particular control groups that he wants to use shared control groups on. So we take the Stalker example. If we want Stalkers to be in our main control group and to be in a secondary control group, we always have them on a certain control group. So I'm going to use sort of normal key bindings here. So imagine we have our Stalkers on 2 and our main army on 1, right? We want to have them on both. So what we do is we use normal add to control group only for control group 2, and we use steel for the rest of them. What that means is number 2 is a regular control group, whereas the rest of them are steel type control groups. And the way you do that is relatively simple. You just go in and swap the add steel with the regular add. You just swap those key bindings. Used to be this, okay, cool, move it. And you just switch places. And then once you do that, now you have your own special Stalker control group. You can still use shared control groups, and you're not gonna run into all these different problems. Unless of course you're using Banelings for 2, in which case that's not gonna work out. If you're a random player like me, you're gonna really have to spend some time and think ahead and say, okay, if 2 is a normal control group for me, what units can't go there? For efficiency reasons. When you're splitting Lings from Banelings, it's super efficient to use steel instead of the normal type, etc., etc. So consider that, and I really like that idea from Probe. I think Probe pretty much has the best solution to that problem. So good on you, Probe. Probe's an awesome Starcraft player that uses the core. Everyone in Australia uses the core. I think for Australians that use the core, we got a bunch. So Fenner isn't really in StarCraft anymore, but he used the core, and that was cool. Pig uses the core, Libby B uses the core, and then NXZ uses the core, and I think a couple other people in Exile 5 use the core as well. So it's happening in Australia, so maybe it'll happen in other places too. Keep an open mind, consider giving it a shot. It's quite nice. But yeah, so hopefully we'll get some more of these mail time, tea time type episodes going on. If you have questions that you want to ask me or things that you want to talk about, then go ahead and send me an email, JaKaTaKtv@gmail.com. Also give me a follow. JaKaTaKtv on Twitter, JaKaTaKtv on Facebook. Just type in a website, put /JaKaTaKtv at the end of it, and that way you can stay up to date when I'm making videos or content or ideas, or if I'm maybe developing an RTS on the side or something. My name is JaKaTak, and as always, thanks for watching. If you have an idea for a video you would like me to do, please leave it with any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, or anything beginning with the letter C in the comment section below, and I'll see you again soon.